Welcome to another episode of Full Frontal Fatherhood. My name is Julian Redwood, and today I want to talk to you about something extremely painful: miscarriages. Miscarriages are this horrific thing that nobody warns you about that land in the midst of what's supposed to be a beautiful, joyful moment of your life. They're devastating and they can have horrible impacts on our family if we don't respond positively to them. So today I want to give you a number of things that you can do to move through the miscarriage and have it be a positive impact overall on your family. The reality is that miscarriages are a normal part of the body's assessment of whether or not the fetus is okay. Making a baby is really complicated and lots of little mistakes happen. In that process, the body needs a way to double check that it's all happening in a good manner. And it usually isn't a statement that you, as a mom or a dad, are not going to be able to have a baby, but just a way for it to get rid of that fetus and move on to the next possibility of being pregnant. But it ends up being really impactful on our lives. And here's how you can handle that impact. The first step is for us men to step up in this intense experience. Women are not only losing their baby and feel the horror and grief of that, but they're also dealing with the shifts of their hormones as they go from pregnant to not pregnant. It actually creates a horrible physiological experience where their emotions are bouncing around everywhere. On top of that, women often feel like there's something wrong with them and that they are a bad woman that isn't going to be able to have babies. It can easily lead to a really negative, dark place where they're worried about their self-worth at their core. What they need from us in that moment is love and embracement and acceptance, a space for all of their bad feelings, lest they feel alone and lost and really hurting. It's our challenge to stand up in that moment and be there in those intense feelings. Often she can be switching between being angry, grieving, sobbing, blaming herself, and blaming us. How do we respond? What they really need from us in that moment is our attention, our listening, our love. But it's hard for us to be in relation to those intense feelings, and we easily move into a position of giving advice or cheerleading them or trying to make them feel better, all of which communicate underlyingly that they should stop feeling how they are feeling and get back to being happy. But that's not how feelings work. By giving feelings space to exist, they move along. When we go into resistance to a feeling, then they get stuck. If a woman is really, really hurting and we can really be with that hurt, she'll be able to move to the other side. So just look her in the eye as she is going through these experiences. Just keep your mouth mainly shut and breathe in the pain that she's going through, even if it's directed at you. Understand the suffering that she's going through and allow her to move it along. You can say little things like, I understand, or I'm so sorry, or I love you, or it's all going to be okay. But from a sincere place of embracement of what she's feeling in that moment. Not you need to feel better because I really can't stand this. If you can occasionally give her that kind of attention, that kind of embracement, and that kind of shoulder to cry on, it'll allow her to much more quickly move through her grief and get to the other side. The second step is a lot easier. It's doing concrete things to show your partner you're there with them. Go out to dinner, have all the things they weren't allowed to have while pregnant. Have champagne, oysters, sushi, chocolate. Celebrate to some level your relationship. Have there be some joy in the midst of this darkness. And then daily, give them little reminders that you're there with them. Little physical things, notes of your love, flowers, chocolates, some way that they can have an anchor in the face of their horrible feelings that are going to ripple through them for days and days. And if they can feel your love, even when you're not there, through some tangible object in front of them, it helps in that moment. The third step is to give yourself space to grieve. It's hard in the midst of all the things that your wife is going through and all the medical needs that are happening to stop and give ourselves space for whatever emotions we're feeling. We as men aren't very good at grieving. We move more easily to anger, frustration, and denial. Distraction is usually how we handle grief. So give yourself even 5 minutes every couple days to sit down. Just notice, how is this for you? Reflect on the loss. Allow yourself a moment to grieve. Perhaps write in your journal, talk to your friends, or tell your partner what's happening for you. Give yourself that space. For me, it took 4 months after my first miscarriage to really deal with that grief. All of a sudden, I found myself crying for hours, and it felt so good to finally process that, move it through, and release that weight so I could move on into life a little lighter. The fourth step is to not let the miscarriage lead to you and your partner getting torn apart and feeling anger towards one another. It's so hard when you're dealing with that many emotions, and each of you are probably processing your grief in a different way, to not end up blaming the other person and getting stuck in that kind of resentment. If you feel that happening, come together with your partner and just share whatever fears are happening in that moment. Say, hey, can you listen to me? I'm really having a hard time here, and I'd like for us to be together in this intense process. Listen to her pain. Ask her what's going on for her so she can feel your acceptance of her feelings. If you're having a hard time with her grief and the hopelessness or powerlessness that she's feeling, see if you can breathe that in. Go back to step one and really try to be there for her. And maybe tell her how you would like for her to be there for how you're dealing with it. Let her know what you're going through. If you're just being quiet and not telling her anything, she has a hard time knowing if it even matters to you, which can actually be worse for her to think she's the only one having a hard time. So come together if you feel it pulling you apart, and don't let it be a detrimental impact. If handled well, it can actually create increased intimacy and trust in your relationship. So use these 4 things to get through the horror of miscarriages and get back to the fun and joy of making babies. Take the space to really hear your partner, breathe in their pain, and find how you can really embrace them. Regularly do concrete things so they have something to hold on to in the face of the waves of despair that are going through them. Give yourself space to process your own feelings. And if it's creating tension between your partner and you, take extra time to sit down and talk about that and come together so you guys can be together in this really hard moment. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Full Frontal Fatherhood. I would love to hear how you have handled these moments and what your experiences have been. Please join the conversation below. But let's keep this really warm and sweet because these are hard things. Thank you for joining me for another episode. I'll see you next Friday. Take care.